What happens when the most valuable company on Earth loses its visionary founder? Does it collapse, drift, or evolve into something even stronger? In 2011, Apple faced that exact question when Steve Jobs passed away, leaving behind a company that had redefined entire industries. The man who stepped up wasn't another showman inventor. He was Tim Cook, a quiet operator from Alabama known for supply chains, not showmanship. But here's what nobody expected. Cook wouldn't just maintain Apple's success, he would transform it in ways that even Jobs might not have imagined. Over a decade later, Apple is bigger than ever, worth more than the entire economies of most countries.
It's the biggest company in the world, with a valuation of around $3 trillion.
But the real story isn't that Cook kept the ship afloat. It's how his leadership has fundamentally changed Apple, for better and for worse. And what that transformation reveals about modern corporate leadership might surprise you. The man behind the machine. To understand Cook's impact, we need to understand the challenge he inherited. When Jobs died in October 2011, Apple was riding high on the iPhone's success, but questions swirled. Could a company built around one man's vision survive without him? Wall Street was skeptical. Competitors were circling. And inside Apple, employees wondered if the magic was gone. Cook had been groomed for this moment, serving as Jobs' right-hand man and temporary replacement during the founder's medical leave. But grooming and leading are different beasts entirely. The pressure was immense. One wrong move and Apple's stock could crash, taking the dreams of millions of investors with it. What Cook did next would either cement his legacy or destroy it. Cook's early reputation was built on supply chain genius. Before becoming CEO, he had streamlined Apple's operations with surgical precision, cut inventory waste to almost zero, and built relationships with manufacturers that gave Apple cost and scale advantages no competitor could match. As CEO, he extended this approach across every aspect of the business, ensuring that Apple's profit margins remained the envy of the entire tech industry. The numbers tell the story. Under Cook's leadership, Apple's gross margins have consistently hovered around 38 to 42%, while most tech companies struggle to maintain 20%. This wasn't accidental. It was the result of obsessive attention to operational details that most CEOs would delegate to subordinates. But the real test came during the COVID-19 pandemic. While global supply chains collapsed like dominoes, Apple still managed to deliver record quarters. Companies like Samsung, Sony, and Microsoft struggled with shortages and delays. Apple seemed almost untouched by the chaos. This wasn't luck. It was the result of decades of operational groundwork that Cook had laid. He had diversified suppliers, built redundancies into critical components, and created relationships based on mutual benefit rather than pure cost-cutting. When the world shut down, Apple's supply chain adapted while others crumbled. However, here's where the story gets complicated. The very discipline that made Apple so resilient may now be the thing holding it back from its next breakthrough. The double-edged sword of perfection. Cook's operational excellence created a culture of risk aversion that Jobs never would have tolerated. Every decision now gets analyzed, optimized, and refined until it's nearly perfect. But perfection takes time, and in tech, timing often matters more than perfection. Consider the Apple Car project, codenamed Titan. Reports suggest Cook's team has been working on it for nearly a decade, constantly refining and re-refining the concept. Meanwhile, Tesla revolutionized the electric car market, and companies like BYD captured massive market share. Apple's perfectionism may have cost it the chance to define yet another product category. This raises an uncomfortable question. Has Apple's operational discipline become a creative straitjacket? Perhaps Cook's most consequential strategic shift was pushing Apple beyond hardware into the sticky world of services. This wasn't just adding a few apps, it was a complete reimagining of Apple's business model. The launch of Apple Music took on Spotify directly. Apple TV Plus challenged Netflix and Disney. iCloud became essential infrastructure for millions of users. Apple Arcade offered gaming without ads. Apple Fitness Plus brought personal training to your wrist. And the App Store evolved from a simple software marketplace into a massive revenue generator that collects billions in fees. Today, Apple's services business generates over $85 billion annually, more revenue than most Fortune 500 companies make in total. This recurring revenue stream cushions the volatility of hardware cycles and creates customer stickiness that competitors find nearly impossible to break. The strategy was brilliant. In an era where smartphone innovation had plateaued and upgrade cycles lengthened, Cook found a way to keep Apple's ecosystem growing and its revenue streams diversified. Instead of selling you a phone every 2 years, Apple now sells you services every month. But success in services came with unexpected complications that would test Cook's principles. The price of diversification. Building a services empire meant Apple had to play by different rules. Content creation for Apple TV Plus required relationships with Hollywood studios known for their liberal politics. App Store dominance attracted regulatory scrutiny from governments worldwide. Cloud services demanded compromises with authoritarian regimes. Each service pulled Apple in different directions, creating internal tensions that Jobs never had to navigate. How do you maintain focus when you're competing in dozens of different markets simultaneously? How do you preserve company culture when your workforce spans from hardware engineers to TV producers to financial services specialists? Cook's answer was to double down on Apple's values, but that strategy would soon reveal its own contradictions. Cook has consistently positioned Apple as a company with principles, not just products. He has taken public stands on privacy, environmental sustainability, LGBTQ+ rights, and supply chain responsibility that go far beyond typical corporate PR. When the FBI demanded Apple unlock the iPhone of the San Bernardino shooter, Cook refused, even facing enormous government pressure. His public letter defending encryption became a manifesto for digital privacy rights. Apple's marketing now leans heavily into privacy as a core differentiator, with campaigns that directly challenge Google and Facebook's business models. On environmental issues, Cook committed Apple to carbon neutrality by 2030, not just for its own operations, but for its entire supply chain. The company has invested billions in renewable energy, created new recycling technologies, and redesigned products to use fewer rare earth materials. Internally, Cook has transformed Apple's culture. Unlike Jobs' volatile genius and famous temper tantrums, Cook projects steadiness, inclusivity, and respect. Employee satisfaction scores have risen consistently under his leadership. The company has become more diverse, more collaborative, and arguably more humane. For many Apple employees, Cook's leadership style has created a healthier, more sustainable work environment where people can build careers without fearing random explosions from the corner office. But scratched beneath the surface of this principled leadership, and uncomfortable contradictions emerge. The contradiction problem. Apple defends privacy as a fundamental human right in the West, while making significant concessions to China's surveillance state. The company removes VPN apps from the Chinese App Store, stores Chinese user data on government-controlled servers, and complies with censorship requests that would be unthinkable in America. Cook argues these compromises allow Apple to serve Chinese customers better than not being in the market at all. Critics argue Apple is putting profits before principles when the stakes are highest. Similarly, Apple's environmental commitments are impressive, but the company still releases new iPhone models every year, encouraging a cycle of consumption that environmentalists argue is fundamentally unsustainable. These contradictions raise deeper questions. Is principled leadership possible for a global corporation? Or are compromises inevitable? And if compromises are necessary, how do you decide which principles to bend? Under Cook's leadership, Apple has delivered impressive technical improvements. The Apple Watch revolutionized wearables, AirPods created the wireless audio market, and custom silicon chips, like the M1 and M2, gave Macs performance advantages that seemed impossible just years before. But Apple has not introduced a wholly new culture-shifting product category under Cook's watch on the scale of the iPod, iPhone, or iPad. The Apple Watch, impressive as it is, was really an extension of the iPhone ecosystem, rather than a completely new computing paradigm. The Vision Pro, Apple's mixed reality headset launched in 2024, might be the closest thing to a revolutionary new product. Early reviews praised its technical sophistication and user interface innovations, but at $3,500, it remains prohibitively expensive and aimed at a niche audience of developers and early adopters. More troubling, the Vision Pro's launch felt different from classic Apple introductions. Where the iPhone immediately showed mainstream applications, the Vision Pro struggled to articulate why normal people would want mixed reality in their daily lives. This raises an uncomfortable question that Cook's critics love to ask. Is Apple's age of breakthrough innovation behind it, or is Cook simply the wrong leader for revolutionary products? The incrementalism trap. Cook's background in operations has created a bias toward incremental improvements over revolutionary leaps. Each iPhone generation gets a better camera, faster processor, and improved battery life. These improvements are meaningful, but they're predictable. Jobs was famous for killing successful products to make room for better ones. He discontinued the iPod mini at its peak to launch the iPod Nano. He pushed the iPhone even though it threatened iPod sales. Cook has shown no similar willingness to cannibalize successful products for revolutionary ones. The result is a company that optimizes brilliantly, but rarely surprises. Apple's product roadmap has become so predictable that tech journalists can accurately forecast new features years in advance. But there's another side to this story. Maybe incrementalism isn't a bug. Maybe it's a feature that reflects market realities Jobs never had to face. Where Jobs favored ruthless simplicity, one iPhone, one iPad, one MacBook, Cook has allowed Apple's product lines to multiply like rabbits. Today's Apple offers multiple iPhone models: the SE, the regular, the Plus, the Pro, and the Pro Max. Numerous iPad variations: the Mini, the Air, the Pro in 2 sizes, and MacBook options that require spreadsheets to understand. On one hand, this strategy expands Apple's market reach. Budget-conscious buyers can get an iPhone SE for $399, while power users can spend $1,599 on a Pro Max. Students can buy a basic iPad for $329, while professionals can configure a Pro model costing over $2,000. The financial results are impressive. By serving every market segment, Apple has grown its user base far beyond what a single premium product line could achieve. Revenue has exploded, and Apple has captured market share across multiple price points. But this expansion comes at a cost. The product matrix has become so complex that even Apple Store employees sometimes struggle to recommend the right device for specific customers. The famous Apple simplicity that made choosing easy has been replaced by a decision tree that rivals buying a car. The irony is striking. What began as a strength, serving every market segment, has evolved into a weakness of brand confusion and diluted focus. The premium paradox. Cook's tiering strategy reveals a deeper tension in Apple's identity. Is Apple a luxury brand that happens to make technology, or a technology company that happens to charge premium prices? Jobs clearly believed Apple was a luxury brand. He studied companies like BMW and Rolex, focusing on customers who valued quality over price. Cook's approach suggests Apple is primarily a technology company that uses luxury pricing to fund innovation. This shift has financial benefits, but cultural costs. When Apple offers 64GB, 128GB, 256GB, 512GB, and 1TB storage options at dramatically different prices, it starts to feel more like a traditional tech company maximizing revenue extraction than a luxury brand focused on user experience. The question becomes, can Apple maintain its premium brand image while pursuing every possible revenue opportunity? Despite Cook's efforts to diversify Apple's revenue streams, the company remains dangerously dependent on the iPhone. In 2023, iPhone sales still accounted for more than half of Apple's total revenue, over $200 billion out of roughly $380 billion in total sales. This dependency creates multiple risks. If global smartphone growth continues slowing, Apple's primary growth engine could stall. If competitors like Samsung or Chinese manufacturers gain significant ground, Apple's pricing power could erode. If regulators force changes to the App Store model, Apple could lose billions in high-margin service revenue. Cook is aware of this risk, which explains his push into services, wearables, and new product categories. But nothing Apple has created comes close to matching the iPhone's scale and profitability. The Apple Watch generates about $18 billion annually. Impressive for most companies, but small compared to the iPhone's $200 billion. Services revenue is growing, but remains tied to the iPhone ecosystem. Even if the Vision Pro succeeds beyond expectations, it would take years to generate iPhone-level revenue. This creates a strategic paradox. Apple needs to reduce iPhone dependency, but the iPhone is so successful that anything else feels like a distraction. The China Challenge. Apple's iPhone dependency becomes even more problematic when considered alongside the company's exposure to China. Not only is China Apple's third largest market, after the Americas and Europe, but Chinese manufacturers assemble virtually all of Apple's products. Recent tensions between the US and China have created new risks. Chinese consumers have shown willingness to boycott Western brands during diplomatic disputes. The Chinese government has demonstrated power to restrict foreign companies when relationships sour. Cook has worked hard to maintain positive relationships with Chinese officials, even when it means making compromises that critics argue conflict with Apple's stated values. But geopolitical tensions are largely beyond any CEO's control. If US-China relations deteriorate further, Apple could face impossible choices: abandon the Chinese market and lose hundreds of billions in revenue, or maintain Chinese operations while facing criticism at home. The bigger picture: leadership in context. To judge Cook fairly, we need to ask, what did Apple need after Jobs died? In 2011, the company didn't need another mercurial visionary who might blow up successful products on a whim. It needed someone who could turn Jobs' vision into sustainable, scalable execution. Cook fit that role perfectly. Under his leadership, Apple became not just a design innovator, but a financial juggernaut that generates more profit than most countries' entire GDP. Its market capitalization soared from under $400 billion when Cook became CEO to over $3 trillion at its peak, making Apple the most valuable company in human history. Cook gave investors the consistency they craved, employees the stability they needed, and customers the reliable products they expected. He proved that Apple was more than just Steve Jobs' personal vehicle. It was an institution that could outlast its founder. But institutional success comes with institutional constraints. Cook's Apple is a company that optimizes brilliantly, but is it bold enough to take the next revolutionary leap? The innovation question. This question becomes more urgent as Apple faces new competitive threats. Artificial intelligence companies like OpenAI are capturing public imagination with breakthrough technologies. Chinese manufacturers are producing smartphones that rival Apple's quality at much lower prices. Regulatory pressure is mounting in multiple countries. Cook's response has been characteristically methodical. Apple is integrating AI features gradually rather than making dramatic announcements. The company is slowly moving some production out of China while maintaining its primary operations there. Apple's legal team fights regulatory challenges, while the policy team builds relationships with government officials. This approach may work, but it's fundamentally different from Jobs' strategy of creating new markets so compelling that competitive and regulatory concerns became irrelevant. The question isn't whether Cook's approach is wrong. It may be exactly what Apple needs in today's complex global environment. The question is whether it's sufficient for Apple to maintain its position as the world's most innovative technology company. What success looks like now. Modern technology leadership faces challenges that didn't exist in Jobs' era. Social media amplifies every corporate mistake. Global supply chains create complex political dependencies. Regulatory scrutiny increases with company size. Environmental concerns demand new approaches to product development. In this context, Cook's steady leadership may be more valuable than visionary brilliance. His ability to navigate complex stakeholder relationships, manage global operations, and maintain consistent execution could matter more than the ability to imagine revolutionary new products. The question is whether Apple can have both: operational excellence and revolutionary innovation. Cook's tenure suggests these qualities may be harder to combine than many people assume. The verdict on Cook's leadership. Tim Cook has been a supremely effective CEO by almost any measurable standard. His leadership transformed Apple from an innovative but operationally chaotic company into a financial titan that generates unprecedented profits while projecting values that resonate with employees, customers, and investors. Under Cook's watch, Apple has expanded its ecosystem, diversified its revenue streams, and built competitive advantages that will be difficult for rivals to overcome. The company has become more global, more inclusive, and more sustainable while maintaining the design excellence that made it famous. But Cook's style has also shifted Apple's DNA in subtle but significant ways. The company has moved from making radical leaps to making incremental improvements, from revolutionary risk-taking to methodical optimization, from simple product lines to complex market segmentation. This evolution may be inevitable for a company of Apple's size and importance. Revolutionary startups become institutional giants, and institutional giants optimize rather than revolutionize. Cook may have simply managed this transition better than anyone else could have. But Apple's ultimate judgment will depend not just on financial metrics, but on whether the company can deliver another transformational product under Cook's leadership. If the Vision Pro or some future innovation achieves that breakthrough, Cook will be remembered not just as the steward who preserved Jobs' Apple, but as the leader who evolved it for a new era. If Apple's revolutionary days are indeed behind it, Cook's legacy will read differently. A time of brilliant execution, impressive growth, and institutional maturation, but also a time when the world's most innovative company became very good at doing what it already knew how to do. The story isn't over. Cook is still Apple's CEO, still making strategic bets, still trying to balance innovation with execution. Whether his quiet revolution ultimately succeeds or falls short may not be clear for years to come. What is clear is that Cook has already achieved something remarkable. He proved that even the most visionary companies can survive and thrive after their founders are gone. In a business world obsessed with celebrity CEOs and dramatic leadership, perhaps quiet competence deserves more credit than it usually gets. The question now is whether quiet competence is enough to write the next chapter of Apple's story, or whether the company's greatest innovations are already behind it.